Slurs: if someone uses a slur, but intends it in a positive way, the hearer may still pick out the negative meaning and feel insulted. That reaction appears justified. Likewise, if someone uses a slur, and the other person does not recognize it as a slur, the act is still wrong. In these cases, the speaker and the appraiser are operating with different reference. In another scenario, someone may speak a different language in which a term has a positive meaning, but that same term is negative in the language of the listener, or the person being referred to. This creates an unintentional wrong, similar to how certain hand signals are interpreted differently across cultures. Further, there are cases of what we might call mirror-reflective slurs. A person who holds bigoted views is called the very thing they are bigoted against. Here, the speaker does not personally endorse the negative connotations of the term. Instead, they are attempting to weaponize the bigot's own prejudice meaning against them. The speaker does not hold the slur as negative, yet they use it to provoke a negative reaction. Meanwhile, the receiver's reaction is grounded in their own unjustified bigoted conception of the term. This turns on use cases and the formative language of intentionality. Even if the speaker knows the word is not inherently negative, the fictional operation of the word in that context is to invoke a negative reaction. The term is being used as an insult despite not being one in the speaker's own conceptual scheme. If the speaker adds further contextually bigoted framing, presenting the person with tokenism as the thing they are bigoted against, then the term can appear to third-party listeners as a weaponized term, a slur. This becomes a bastardization of identity language, presenting wholly as a slur regardless of the speaker's internal meaning, a phenomenon that sits alongside 1. Ordinary slur use and 2. Mirror-reflective slur use. It's subtle, but it matters for how groups regulate themselves. Inferred bigotry through facetious group stereotyping. This is the pattern. Individual X belongs to some group. Someone says, "Whoa, of course X would do that," implying a stereotype about that group. Another person responds facetiously, "Yes, because all of X people do that," using exaggeration or sarcasm to highlight the stereotype. The speaker isn't endorsing the stereotype, they're mocking it, but the utterance still performs the stereotype in language. That creates a risk of reinforcing the stereotype, normalizing the phrasing, or causing harm to X or others who share that identity. This is structurally similar to mirror-reflective slurs, but with a key difference. Mirror-reflective slurs target a bigot. Facetious group stereotyping targets the stereotype itself, but still risks collateral harm. The speaker intends irony, critique, or mockery of the stereotype. The listener may hear reinforcement of the stereotype, a joke at X's expense, or a signal that the group is fair game for mockery. 3. Social meaning. Even if the speaker rejects the stereotype, the form of the utterance can still reproduce it. This is what philosophers call echoic use. Sperber and Wilson, repeating harmful language to mock it. Echoic use is morally safer than direct use, but not harmless. Speech act theory, Austin, Searle, Butler, treats utterances as actions that do things they can insult, exclude, or affirm depending on context, intention, and uptake. A slur's moral and legal weight turns on illocutionary force, what the speaker intends, e.g., insult, reclaim, critique. Perlocutionary effect, how the hearer experiences it, e.g., harm, offense, intimidation. Conventional meaning versus pragmatic use, whether the term's social history overrides the speaker's intent. HR assessment context. In workplace investigations, HR typically applies a reasonable person standard and impact over intent principle. Even if the speaker claims positive or ironic intent, the impact on the listener governs whether it constitutes harassment. HR evaluates pattern, power dynamics, and cultural awareness, not just isolated words. Training frameworks, EOC guidance, SHRM best practices, emphasize intent does not erase impact. Cross-cultural misunderstandings, e.g., gestures or terms with divergent meanings, are treated as mitigated violations, still wrong, but remediable through education rather than discipline. U.S. legal study. Under U.S. law, slurs intersect with several doctrines. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act 1964 prohibits harassment creating a hostile work environment based on protected categories, race, sex, religion, national origin, etc. Courts assess whether language is severe or pervasive enough to alter employment conditions. First Amendment boundaries. Outside employment, speech is protected unless it constitutes true threats, fighting words, or discriminatory conduct. Defamation and tort law. Slurs can form part of reputational harm if they assert false identity claims. Hate crime statutes elevate penalties when slurs accompany bias-motivated acts, showing intent to intimidate. Academic and workplace speech codes often rely on contextual balancing between free expression and anti-harassment obligations. Integrative considerations. Intentionality spectrum. From ignorance, negligence, recklessness, malice. HR and courts calibrate response accordingly. Cross-linguistic ambiguity requires cultural competence review. HR may consult DI officers or linguists. Mirror-reflective slurs, ethically complex, may be rhetorically justified, but still violate policy if perceived as hostile. Third-party perception. Even if the target understands the irony, bystander's interpretation can trigger institutional liability. In both HR and legal frameworks, impact and context outweigh subjective intent. The philosophical insight that meaning arises through social uptake aligns with the legal principle that harm is judged by reasonable interpretation, not private semantics. Shared norm formation. Groups should explicitly articulate language norms rather than assuming shared understanding. Create community guidelines that define unacceptable speech and explain why, linking it to harm, not censorship. Encourage metacommunication, talking about how words function, not just what they mean. Use restorative dialogue when harm occurs, asking what impact did this have, instead of was it intentional? This mirrors HR's impact over intent principle, but operates informally through peer consensus. 2. Reflexive accountability. Develop peer-based correction mechanisms. Normalize gentle correction. Hey, that term might carry baggage, can we unpack it? Rotate moderators or discussion facilitators so power doesn't concentrate. Encourage self-check moments, pauses before posting, or speaking to consider audience diversity. This creates distributed responsibility, similar to checks and balances in governance but scaled to interpersonal ethics. 3. Contextual education. Prevent harm through continuous cultural literacy. Share examples of cross-linguistic misunderstandings and reclaim terms. Host informal teach-ins or reading circles on speech act theory, bias, and identity language. Use storytelling to humanize abstract harm. how words shape belonging and exclusion. Education transforms reactive correction into proactive awareness. 4. Mirror-reflective use boundaries. When using irony or mirror-reflective slurs to critique bigotry, clarify intent publicly. I'm using their own term to expose its prejudice. Avoid repetition that normalizes the term. Frame the act as performative critique, not retaliation, maintaining moral distance from the slur's original harm. This keeps rhetorical resistance from collapsing into mimicry of hate speech. 5. Informal restorative justice. When harm occurs, use restorative circles, small group dialogues focused on repair, not punishment. Center the harmed party's experience, while allowing the speaker to explain context. Agree on concrete follow-ups, education, apology, community reflection. This mirrors HR's corrective action, but remains community-driven and empathetic. 6. Structural balance. To prevent dominance or bias, rotate leadership and decision-making roles. Maintain transparency in moderation and conflict resolution. Encourage dissent as a form of care. Disagreement signals engagement, not hostility. Checks and balances here mean distributed interpretive authority. No single person defines what counts as harm. Outside formal systems, the best safeguard is collective reflexivity, a culture where members continually examine how language performs power. The goal isn't perfection, but iterative calibration, adjusting norms as the group's composition and awareness evolve.